Okay, so thank you for the invite to share some of the work that we've been doing. I'm not going to spend too long on an introduction. I do want to take a minute to very briefly highlight the reason why I'm doing the work I'm doing with the team that I'm working with. And the quote that you see in front of you oh, thank you, outlines the foundation of the work that we do. And so what we know is that when we have flowers that don't bloom, we don't blame them. And so if our students are our flowers and right now they're struggling, we're not blaming them. We're going to look at their environment and what's around them and what's happening. And so that is the work that we're doing now. You have a selection of handouts in front of you that I'm going to guide you through as we work through the presentation. So not to start on a negative note, but just so you're aware that the process has been a bit of a struggle because of things like burnout that we are seeing in our staff and our students, and because of the combination of fear and anxiety and this no end in sight right now. Really, we don't know what's going to happen from a day-to-day basis. And so when that's in place, all of those things lead to a reduced capacity to empathize with other human beings. And so that's something from Jody Carrington and Doctors Amelia and Emily Nagoski. And I think that's really important just to keep at the forefront of our brains as we move forward, because this has been a challenge, but one that I welcome, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the work next year. So some background, I guess, some context from a district perspective. You can see with the data in front of you that our consultation rates from our district mental health clinicians has significantly increased from October until March. You can see that our individual therapy rates that our mental health clinicians are providing for our students has also significantly increased. These are good things. These are good signs that what's happening in schools is what we need to be happening in schools. Our teachers and our staff are realizing that kids need support and staff need support. And so our mental health clinicians are being called out to provide that one-on-one support through consultation purposes or through supporting students individually, providing that therapeutic support. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through some of the work that the team has done. So if you turn to your first handout, it says number 1 and framework. We needed a framework that was going to be sustainable, and we wanted one that was holistic so that we targeted all aspects of schools. We weren't just going to look at what was happening directly in classrooms, because we knew that although that is a very realistic and plausible starting point, the picture is bigger than that. And so the framework that we went with was a Wellbeing BC framework that was directed in partnership with Kim Schonert-Reichel, who was part of putting the MDI survey together that we rolled out with our students this year. And I'll touch base on that a little bit later as well. And Dr. Haley Watson, who is the creator of Open Parachute, which is another mental health support that we're rolling out in schools right now. And so to really feel confident that the work that we're going to do is going to be holistic in terms of touching on elements like policy and procedures, looking at all environments in our schools, including hallways, bathrooms, shared spaces that kids are spending time in together, the direct teaching of social emotional learning and mental health literacy skills in classrooms, as well as partnerships with our community members and our families. This one made the most sense. And so our secondary schools put teams together, and those teams worked hard to reflect on each of these subcategories within the pillar that we chose to focus on. And so your second handout, it says pillar number 2, supportive social and physical environments. And pillar 2 is the one we focused on because we felt that each of these subcategories were hardest hit due to the collective trauma of COVID. So we're looking at teacher-student relationships, staff relationships. They're all in front of you. I'm not going to walk you through them. But at the very bottom, we know that our adults need to be looking after themselves so that they can look after our kids. So that's really been a focus of some of the work that we've done this year as well. Our school-based teams then completed something called a reflection tool that's built into the Wellbeing BC model. And you can see in your handout number 3, it says reflection examples. And what they did as a company was they took each of those subcategories and they broke them down into a rubric. And so each of our school-based teams took the time to reflect on each of the areas, all of those 9 subcategories, and give themselves a mark. So what that did for us was it identified areas that the school needed support in the most. We felt confident that we had heard from the mental health literacy teams at the school, but we were missing a big piece of the data, and that was the voice of our kids. And we have seen some really powerful work from Student Voice this year through the DSAC committee. And so we knew that it was important to make sure that we heard them and gave them a chance to share what they were feeling in terms of the areas that we were focusing on. And so handout number 3 says student survey. This is what we asked them. And you may be familiar with some of these questions because some of them came from the standardized questions from the student learning survey. So we looked at some of the questions that as a district mental health literacy team we came up with, connected to each of those 9 subcategories. And then we wanted to honor the validity of that provincial survey. And so we chose which one we thought was best fit and used that to gather the information from our students. There's some sample survey responses in your package as well. It's the first set of the 11 by 17 sheets. And it just gives you an idea, because we're starting to see similar patterns and trends across the board, across all of our high schools. So it gives you an idea of what the students are saying and how we're starting to target the direction that we're going. So I wanted to really hit on 2 things. So first of all, students are telling us that no matter their race, their identity, their gender, however they choose to identify within themselves from a cultural perspective to a sexual identity, they're feeling included in their classrooms. First and foremost, that came through very strong. Our teachers are doing good work in terms of kids being able to feel comfortable coming in. Where we're starting to see some disconnect is in that last question. You can see that a significant amount of students from that one school, the last question is the one with a pie chart, and it's having a connection with one adult who makes them feel welcome. And that one adult is going to make the difference. We know that. We know that through a Vitra lens. We know that through an educator lens. We know that as long as kids are connected to one adult, they're going to come to school and they're going to feel safe. So that's where some of our work went. We started to walk side by side with our staff at schools to determine the areas that they needed support in. We are working on adult SEL. We are working on specifically that sense of community and safety within schools. We are working through, I'm going to take a step back. We took the data from the students and we took the reflection tool that the mental health literacy teams at each building completed. And we created what was called a mental health literacy IEP, so an individual education plan specific to that building, based on what that building is saying, based on what the kids in that specific buildings are saying, because our schools are so different. So we needed to make sure that whatever we're doing, it's not a one size fits all, because that's not how education works. And so there's an example of an IEP as well in your package following that data if you wanted to look. We knew that we had to support the margins. So we're starting to provide supports for kids who are coming, but what about the kids that aren't coming? We know a lot of them aren't coming because of mental health struggles. And so what we did was we offered something called a wellness support block. And sorry, that's handout number 7, supporting the margins. And the wellness support block is offered twice a week from 4 till 6 p.m. And the conversation that I got to have with the teachers working on the wellness support block was this: I want you to throw curriculum out the window, and I want you to get to know these kids. I want you to build a relationship with them. I want you to have fun with them. I want you to find out what they're interested in. I want you to hold their story. Because eventually what we're hoping to see is that if they start coming regularly from 4 till 6 and they start feeling confident walking through those doors and coming into that space with that teacher that they're building a connection with, then maybe next year in September they'll come just once a day. That's a win. And if we can get 3 students in each building that's attending the wellness block to do that, to register for just one class in September, that's a win. And so once they feel that that foundation of a relationship and a connection is there, we have a mental health clinician attached to that specific block as well. And so in the meantime, she's providing that therapeutic response, that therapeutic support to all of the students that are showing up, in addition to supporting their parents. So she's to the point now where at College Heights Secondary School, she has to make appointments because the demand is so high for parents and students wanting to connect with her and get that support from her. So we know that something is working, and we're going to carry it through till June and follow those kids really closely. I wanted to give you a bit of a background on how we attempted to support adults in different ways. So handout number 7 that says supporting the margins adults. We provided 2 different opportunities. One was called Together Tuesdays, and it really was just a chance for our secondary school teachers to come together online and talk about wellness. And that was wellness of self or wellness of our students. So you can see there's the examples of the people who presented. So I was the host, and then I had a co-host. I had Stephen Nunes, Miranda Grattan, Kelsey McDonald, etc. And they talked about something they were passionate about connected to wellness. The uptake, unfortunately, was not very good. And so in conversation with Daryl Beauregard, we are trying to figure out what may be a more suitable time to offer it, because perhaps 8 to 8:30 was difficult for many of our adults to commit to sitting and just having a conversation. We also tried Unpacking Your Workday. It was a hallways to home initiative. And that was a chance for the adults in our building to unload whatever they were carrying with them so that they could go home and be more present with their families or be more present with themselves. We had some success in some buildings with some individuals, but again, the uptake wasn't there for us to really say, this is working, let's continue with it. So we're revisiting that one as well. And then lastly, letting you know what's next. So we have some big dreams and some hopes. We are continuing to work on pillar 2, because as I said, the challenges have presented themselves forcefully in some situations. I have a lot of respect for administrators who are very protective of their staff and are saying to me, they can't take on anymore, they can't learn anymore. And so we've been treading very gently and making sure that they feel supported before we ask them to take on anything extra to do with mental health. So we're going to continue the work that we started this year in that pillar. The hope is that we can, at some point next year, start tipping our toes into another pillar, be that family and community partnerships, if that's where the school would like to focus, or one of the other 2. We are starting to work on a board-approved mental health leadership course. So I'm a little bit competitive just when it comes to my job. Vancouver is already rolling out their mental health leadership course. And when they told me that 2 months ago, I said, okay, it's time. This isn't a 5-year plan. This is we got to get rolling on this as of now. So the mental health leadership team on a district level are going to start talking about what that can look like. We're working towards having mental health ambassadors in every one of our schools. So PGSS is the forefront of this work right now. They're in the middle of creating a job description for ambassadors, as well as an application for ambassadors, and how those ambassadors will work in their buildings and communicate with staff on the needs of what the student body is as it presents itself in each of the school. Relationship mapping, I'm going to come back to in just a second. We are rolling out a wellness week at Mackenzie Secondary School in June. And so we're just going to use Open Parachute to get teachers starting to explore the program a little bit and talk about feelings, which is something that isn't usually done in high schools, through Open Parachute and the guidance that it provides. And so that will culminate in a final day of just participating in activities that are connected to well-being and wellness that the kids can enjoy. We are looking at an SD57 trauma-informed practice learning series. That's a bit of a dream, and that's conversations that Ange Dumac behind me and I started having today. And of course, we'll be involving April Hendrickson as well, because she's starting to do that work in Indigenous Ed. And then relationship mapping. So this is a Harvard University initiative. And I was introduced to it at a different school. And what it does is it, sorry, I'm going to direct you back to the handout so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. So it's handout number 7, it says relationship mapping. The foundation of relationship mapping is to identify which adults are connected to which student in the building. So we printed out, for one school, we printed out the whole school, their first name and their last name, against the different levels of connection that you can see outlined on your handout. So what the adults did was then they noted if they know the student's name, but they don't know them to see them. So I've heard their name maybe once or twice in the staff room. Or if they know the student's face and name. If they know the student's strengths, challenges, interests, what makes them laugh. And then lastly, if they know how to support this student on a social emotional level, which is really the goal, is to have one adult who can do that for every single student in our building. So we did this at Mackenzie Secondary School. And they then took the next step, and during a staff meeting, they talked about how they build relationships and connection with their kids. They're taking their teaching back to square one, because everybody gets into this work because they love kids on some level. And sometimes when we're in the midst of a pandemic, I think we forget and we start focusing on what's safe for us. And sometimes for our educators, what's safe is the curriculum because it's familiar. So we worked together. I worked with Martin and Justin at MSS, and we really peeled back. What does it mean to build a connection? How do we harness the sense of safety in our classrooms so that our students want to come? How do we support peer connectedness? Because as the MDI research is showing us, our kids are 2 social emotional years behind their peers simply because they haven't had this exposure to these social interactions for the last 2 years that they normally would have had. So how do we support that peer connectedness within our classrooms so that our kids want to come again? You can see some of the ideas that they highlighted in the handouts that I shared with you. And I do have permission from Martin to share these with you today, so he knows that you're receiving them. I wanted to finish on this note. And on the screen, it says finding and holding on to moments of joy. Because at the end of the day, what seems simple and really maybe not applicable, this simplistic idea of kindness is really what is getting us through the work that we're doing. And finding time to pause. My boss is probably the boss of practicing the pause. She reminds us on the daily, practice the pause. And harness moments of joy is what's going to get us through. And this human has lived for 2.5 years in the middle of a pandemic, and he finds joy every single day for me. And I get to share that with him. And now I get to share that with the educators in our high schools. And so although the work seems really superficial, it's been, as I said, a challenge, but a welcome challenge. And I can't wait to continue in the next few years, because the rollout is definitely going to be a few years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive, detailed, thorough presentation, and so much to absorb and think about and process. And I'm cognizant of time too. It is 10 to 6, and I know Angela has been patiently waiting. But we entertain a few questions or comments if there's, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that I've been working with Aubrey at our mental health literacy team at CBTI Secondary. I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. And it has been astounding, the work that we're doing. We are a little late in the game because we were feeling we didn't have the time after school in order to provide this. So we were looking at kindness keepers, but we've had a conversation about how to move forward for GP taught, and we're really excited about it. And I know that our kids are really excited about the mindfulness piece of it as well, because they are feeling that. You know, the last couple of years have been such a struggle for them, and it feels like a gift to them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great feedback. Thank you for that. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I like the fact you brought a prop. You actually brought a flower here too. Is it? Yeah. That's lovely.
Just before they leave.
Yeah, go ahead, Chair Warrington.
I just want to thank you very much for the detail and the handouts. Is it Aubrey? Yes, thank you so much for Anissa for these, because this is good information for us to dig a little deeper into and get a better feeling. Thank you so much.
We're going to include that data in our framework report.
Good,
Have permission.
excellent.